Hi there, welcome to Autism 101. In this live, I'm going to be talking about what autism is, who it affects, and what some of the signs and the traits are. So I'm AJ Harman. I'm a neurodivergent coach, and I'm also a writer and a speaker on neurodiversity issues. I was diagnosed with autism and ADHD combined myself in 2020 when I was 52. That came both as a bit of a shock and also a complete light bulb moment. Everything kind of fell into place, and I understood, what my life had been up until then and why. I've been learning more and more about how those two conditions overlap and how they interact together. And believe me, there's a whole raft of issues that come with those two things together. And I'm going to do some lives in the future all about that specifically, because I know that more and more people now are being diagnosed with both. And, there really is a kind of unique presentation that comes with that. However, for now, I'm just going to focus on the two individual conditions, and most of the lives I've done so far have been on ADHD. So now I'm just going to turn my attention to autism for a little bit. So today I'm just going to start with a very basic introduction. I know that there'll be some people here who are already very familiar with what autism is and what autistic traits are, but there's also an awful lot of people that really aren't. So I want to just start from the beginning and introduce it, and also kind of look at some of those myths that lots of people have around autism and autistic people. So today, autism is usually diagnosed as ASD or ASC, and that stands for Autism Spectrum Disorder, or a lot of people prefer to use Autism Spectrum Condition because it really isn't a disorder. Lots of people think that it is, a type of mental illness or a disease of some kind, and it really is not that. It's a neurodevelopmental disorder. Not disorder, see how easy it is to use that condition. And it's a condition that affects the nervous system and the brain, and it's just a difference in how the brain and the nervous system are set up and how they process things. So since 2013, ASD or ASC has been the umbrella term that's covered lots of different diagnoses that you would have seen before that. So you might have heard of things like Asperger's syndrome, classic autism, atypical autism, high functioning autism, and pervasive developmental disorders. So now you don't get those individual classifications, but you get this umbrella term of ASD. You may still see or hear people talking about their diagnosis, say of Asperger's syndrome or whatever. That will be because usually it will be because they've been diagnosed before this new term came in. It's still relevant to lots of people. Lots of people still like to describe themselves the way that they were originally diagnosed. But a lot of those terms are no longer used. And partly that, there's a good reason for that. Things like high functioning or low functioning autism are really not used now. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that, just for respect, the idea that there's this continuum and that somebody is classed as, low functioning is an awful, kind of way to think of it anyway. But also it does a disservice as well to those people who people describe as high functioning, because it kind of negates the challenges that a lot of people face. And also it's not strictly correct because it can vary over time. It can vary kind of throughout a lifetime. It can vary day to day on what you know, how you can function. So you might be kind of really high functioning one day in a certain aspect of life, and then the next day be really, really struggling. So, you know, it's not really representative to talk about high functioning and low functioning. The other thing to say is that it is a lifelong condition. So the people, you know, it isn't just children that's affected, you know, it goes through into adulthood. It isn't kind of a curable or treatable condition. It is, you know, it is just the way the person functions. The type of things that it affects, and you know, in the past they used to talk about something called the triad of impairment, but now again it's kind of, it's not focused totally on the idea of impairment, because autistic people have, you know, huge strengths and talents, as well as the challenges in certain areas. So now they just talk about the kind of the areas that are affected, and they can be social interaction, they can be communication, they can be behaviour, and they can be the way that the person experiences, processes and reacts to sensory stimulation. You know, so all the inputs from all of our senses, the way that the nervous system processes those and reacts to them is different in autistic people than in non-autistic people. But the main thing to really, really get across, and I will put after this, I'll put something in the comments that like a graphic that represents this, is the idea that no two autistic people are exactly the same, kind of in the traits or the degree to which they're affected. Every person's kind of completely unique, and you have a complex mix of different traits. And as I say, they the severity of the challenges or you know, the amazing strengths and talents can wax and wane, you know, over different days. So I think in future lives I'm going to talk about those specific areas, kind of take one at a time and talk about the type of things that you might see or might take might experience yourself, excuse me, if you're autistic, or if you you know, have a loved one or a friend who's autistic, the type of things that you might want to take into account, or you know, to help. So I'll be doing that in future. But for the moment, I thought I'd just mention some of those kind of myths that about autism. So of course, one of the main things is this stereotype of an autistic person as being either, it's like a, you know, it's seen as this kind of linear spectrum, a line from you know, a complete genius down to someone who's non-verbal and can't communicate at all. And of course, you know, that is a complete stereotype, and that there is, you know, a whole range in the middle. And then the other things you often hear people say is something like, you know, well, everyone's a little bit on the autistic spectrum, aren't they? And that's simply not true. You're either autistic or you're not. And one analogy that I heard recently that I really liked actually was like the idea that, you know, people might say, oh, you know, if someone's experiencing back pain and swollen ankles, they might be a little bit pregnant. So yeah, the line from low functioning to high functioning, I've covered that. Another obviously big stereotype is that it only affects or mainly affects males. And again, that's simply not true. And one of the things that I will cover in future is exactly how it can present in females that can be different. it's not necessarily 100%. You can get females who present in the same kind of external way that a lot of people, like the stereotypes that people imagine, are based on the research and the diagnostic criteria and things that were created for male autistic people. And so, you know, you get those more obvious signs that people tend to know about. So you can get some females that have those as well, and you can get some males that have the more internal presentation that most females present with. So it's not always obvious, you know, and quite often, you know, lots of girls and women have heard, you know, oh, you don't seem autistic. And that's just because most people don't really know what it looks like, what it means to be autistic. The idea of it being a mental health condition or illness as well, you know, that's simply not true. However, it can often come with associated conditions like depression and anxiety. And part of that is the whole kind of masking to fit in with a society that doesn't really fit you can lead to depression and anxiety. So it's you know, it's really common. I think yes, just again on the prevalence of ASD in males and females, it's thought at the moment to be in the ratio of around 3 to 1. So for every 3 males, there's 1 female. So it's slightly more prevalent in males, possibly, but it is still, you know, still present in females. And actually, most people think that's because a lot of females go undiagnosed. Okay, so I think I've covered everything that I wanted to. I'm just wondering if anybody has any questions or comments. Let's just have a look at the comments. And high functioning autism, really offensive, because my argument is just because I function highly on the outside doesn't mean it's happening on the inside. Exactly. Yes, exactly. Thanks, Steph. I prefer to say high support needs and low support needs. Yes, that's a good idea. And again, you know, that fits with the idea that the support needs on any particular day might be different. You know, I might have higher support needs today, but tomorrow, you know, barely any. So it can really change, fluctuate. Oh, thank you, Ronnie, saying how informative. So oldest is non-verbal, and I find people associate that with uneducated. Yes, exactly. And yeah, I mean, I will do a whole thing on communication, but often it's the idea that, you know, an autistic person can't communicate very well, or understand, or you know, or learn, but actually it's more to do with being able to verbalize things. Yeah, and Steph's agreeing with that. That's totally true. You know, and again, you know, even so I don't have a massive problem with communication, but there are definitely days when I really would struggle to put things into words, especially if my nervous system is really being overloaded. You know, that's one of the biggest things. We can get very overstimulated, overloaded, and that can end in sort of one of 2 outcomes as well. Is you may have heard of or seen a meltdown or a shutdown. And a meltdown is kind of when the system is so overloaded, and the kind of expression caused is external, it's forced outwards, and it can be in behaviour, or it can be you know, kind of in aggressive language, or screaming or shouting. But a shutdown is similar in that it's, you know, it's caused by this overloading of the system, but the system kind of internalizes it rather than externalizes it, and that's when you know, you can just completely go into shutdown and can't communicate, can't deal with things, and you know, I find that quite often actually, if I'm getting really overloaded and tired, quite often I literally just will go and curl up and sleep, and that's my way of just shutting down for a little while until I can manage again. Oh yes, and Liz is saying yes, putting things into words is hard. It is, Liz. It is. I know you were diagnosed recently as well, weren't you? So Steph is saying, I used to look after a teenage boy who wasn't entirely non-verbal. He could talk, but he just didn't waste words. Yes, exactly. If he spoke, he knew he felt very strongly about the thing at hand. Yeah, absolutely. And there are all sorts of nuances to do with that. I was talking to someone recently, actually someone in my group program was talking about, you know, things like wording emails and messages, and it's, you know, it can be a very direct way, without lots of flowery language and lots of, you know, how are you, you know, like all the lead up, which is like small talk but in an email, and you know, just speaking very directly. And I think we've got to the point where most of us have, especially if we were undiagnosed, have masked all our life. So that's basically just kind of unconsciously taking on society's kind of rules and norms and fitting in as much as we possibly could, so that it actually becomes instinctive. I mean, I had to write emails for years and years and years to clients and everything as a freelance editor, so I just learned how to kind of do that. But it doesn't come really naturally, and lots of people see it as rudeness, and it isn't rudeness. It's just a wanting to get to the point and say something very directly. Yeah, so Stephanie's talking about this person that she was saying it definitely resembled selective mutism a lot of the time, and his school thought he was academically working at the level of a 6-year-old. I assure you he was not. I genuinely believe he was just happy, silently observing. Yeah, absolutely. Right, okay, if anyone has any questions, I'll just hang on for a second, but if not, I'm going to end there. And I think in future ones, I'm going to talk a lot more about the specific traits and things, but I'll also talk about things like autism in the workplace, how we can make workplaces better for autistic individuals to really thrive. You know, for so long, it's like with the communication piece, for so long we've had to mask and fit in to everybody else's way of working, which is really draining, and, you know, is energetically costly. And if we could only do things our way, then, you know, we will thrive so much more, and within the workplace we will, you know, do amazing things. So that's my alarm going off actually, so I think I will end it there. Okay, thank you very much for coming, and I'll see you next time. Bye.